this month, we're looking at how to do a customer pitch and specifically how to craft that messaging that will have impact and that is memorable for your customers. So what you'll get out of today is quite simple. You'll walk away with the tools and processes of how to craft that good narrative. People say all the time, oh, just, do storytelling, but no one tells us how to do it. And that's exactly what's going to happen today. In the curated breakout rooms, you'll be given a chance to do a 90-second pitch. In the breakout rooms, you'll get personalized feedback from other founders on the journey. These founders they know your struggle, so they want to see you succeed. Put your hand up, pitch, try it. And then at 12, we'll gather back here to kind of ask Ginny all of the burning questions for a Q&A before we wrap. So our guest today is Ginny Radmall, and I got to spend some time with Ginny over the last week. She's a founder, she's the director of the IV Way. Ginny has worked with huge names, Microsoft, IKEA, Google, and she is also well known within the startup arena because she has delivered coaching for all of the international accelerators, Google for Startups, Techstars, Startupbootcamp, Startupwiseguys. It's a very long list. So you're in for a treat. She knows what she's talking about. Ginny, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me. I've genuinely been looking forward to this all week. As Radine said, I've been worked with some of the big accelerator names, but also really love what's happening in the Irish tech scene as well. So work with Dogpatch, have worked with NDRC and also with Republic of Work. So really looking forward to speaking to you guys today, wherever you're calling in from, because this session is to equip you with the tools, with some exercises. So if I can do whatever I can to be most helpful, then that's the aim of this. And later on, we've got some time for Q&A as well. So I'll just come to the chat because some interesting things coming through already. So Kayla said, miss the ability to make eye contact. Yeah, really, really hard not being able to look somebody in the face and pick up from those small signals you often see. We've also got getting all stakeholders in a room, not even together, but just with the time in people's calendars, that being quite tricky. Let's see, yeah, finding it hard to distill down the information from Fintan as well there. And then this really, I really empathize with this, Diane. Staring at the wall and hoping people haven't dropped off is very unnerving. It feels like you're speaking into a void. And it might be a little bit different if it's a one-on-one conversation. Hopefully the person you're speaking to maybe has their camera on, or if you're talking on the phone, it feels like they're with you, but still we don't get much energy back. So what we are outputting, the level of energy that we have to give our audience is much higher, I think, than when we were doing this sort of pitching face-to-face. Let's see if there's any other themes in what people have said. Missing the body language cues from Liam and reading the room. Fully feeling the energy of people in the room. So yeah, I think a lot of people in the chat are talking about what we're normally picking up from the audience, how we mirror or feel something from our people as we're speaking. Great, keep these coming. I'll come back to some of these across the rest of the session as well. So first of all, I want to talk a bit about just generally an overview of what's helpful to include in your customer pitch. And then we'll bore down, we'll do a bit of a deep dive into some areas in particular. So I'll just share my screen with you to do that. A few things to make sure you have in your pitch. These are a little bit like Lego blocks sometimes. People sometimes switch the order of these around slightly. So that might be for you, depending on your company, where you're at, what stage you're at. Some of these elements might apply more, something you really need to flesh out, or there might be some pieces that you don't talk about as much. But the first thing you need in your pitch is a hook. You have to start with something which gets my ears to prick up and listen. So it's worth taking a second and thinking, what is it that you really want your audience to remember? Or flip it round and ask yourself, if your audience were to forget everything, and I'm sure they wouldn't, but if they were to forget everything but only remember one thing, what would you need that to be in your pitch? And later on, when we get you pitching to one another, for those of you that would like to, we're going to get you to reflect back to one another on what you actually remember from each other's pitches. It's a really good exercise. Pitch to somebody and ask them what they actually took away or remembered. So start with something that is snappy, that grabs your audience in. And then you might take us through a really quick highlight, a bit of a value proposition, which might look something like this. So starting with the company name, helps your target audience by doing whatever it is, whatever service or product, so you can or they can, and then you'll explain the benefit. Let me just explain how I do this with my company. So I would say the Ivy Way helps startup founders tell their story in a memorable way so that when they pitch, people sit up and listen. So you've got the company name, who my target audience is, what it is I do, and then what the benefit is for them. And then you'll go into the problem statement. And this is what we're going to do a deep dive of in a second. How do you describe the problem that you're solving and really get the sense of the pain across to the audience? If I don't care about the problem, if I don't care about what you're saying, I'm not going to want to hear the solution. So it's so crucial to make sure that is really understood. In To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, he talks about the fact that we've up until now often considered ourselves as problem solvers. We love to tell people how to solve their problems. But actually nowadays we need to be problem finders. We need to find ways of bringing insight to our customers' problems, of helping them even see needs they didn't even know they had or weren't as obvious to them, and explaining it in a way which really resonates, which gets to the heart of the problem. And then when you've done that, then you're able to go on to talk about the solution and some of the benefits. I know in the last Founders Circle, Rob Fitzpatrick was talking about listening, really listening to your customers. So hopefully, if you've done that well, there'll be things that you can weave into this problem solution to any part of your customer pitch, really, to make sure it's actually speaking to some of their needs. Fifth point down is having some proof, customer testimonials, if you have them. And then talking through business model or pricing, if that's appropriate or applicable. And then finally, a call to action. What's next? What do you want that person to do who is listening to you speak? That's a bit of an overview. I want to do a deep dive into that problem and solution part and how you use storytelling language to do that. So what I'd love you guys to do, let me just stop showing the slides for a second so to enable you. I want you to jump onto something called Mentimeter. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. It's a really fun way of just gathering different people's thoughts on something. So I'll drop the link in here. Just watch out for the chat now. And then the code I want you to type in once you open that web page is this: 6334175. And once you've done that, what you'll see is, sorry, it's gonna look a bit weird. Once you open that up, what you'll see is a question. It will say, what do good stories need, or what ingredients do good stories need? And then it will give you the option to jot down 2 answers. So 2 things that come to mind as soon as you think of storytelling or messaging that really sticks with you. I just want to get a sense of what you guys from your end think or feel like a story or a good story does or has in it. So jump onto Mentimeter and then type in that code, and we'll start to see what people are doing over there. So let me just stop sharing for a sec. Give me a thumbs up if you found it. I want to just make sure I've not sent you to the wrong place. Good. So we've got some great things coming in already. If you can't currently access Mentimeter, then feel free to use the chat function to just write down some answers instead. So one of the big words I've got in the middle, we've got relatable, emotion, and a hero. And then there's a smattering of things around the side. So got hook a few times, clarity, being fun and entertaining, humor. There's actually quite a big theme of a lot of people mentioning humor or something being funny, which is really interesting. Something that uses your imagination. We've got that word, compelling characters, a baddie, love that word, or a villain somebody else has put. And then that crisis point as well. Really interesting just to see what sticks. It sounds like those 3 words that we began with have really stuck in the middle. So I imagine a few people have repeated other people's words as well there. Somebody's put Edward. I'm not sure what that refers to, if you had a film in mind, but whatever works for you. Maybe Edward is a key part of any story for yourself. All right, so let's actually look at how you put together a really compelling story using some of these pieces you've just identified in this chat. Let's go here. So the Pixar Framework is a really helpful tool for if you really want to go back to basics and think of how do you put a very simple story together. So when Pixar are creating their films, they use these 6 sentences to summarize the entire film. So they have the first sentence, which is once upon a time, and they set the scene and describe who the character is, where they're based, what does the world look like. And then they follow that with an everyday. So it's a bit more of an expansion of what is it they're experiencing? What's the pain that a hero or a person might be in? And then something happens. There's this line where everything starts to shift, which is, but one day. And that's that moment where, after explaining the pain that customer, that hero has been in, that you then go on to describe somebody coming in, the wise mentor, the company coming in to save the day. And then these last few lines are describing what the impact of that is. And because of that, until finally, what's the resolution? What's the benefit? So have a go at writing down what your version of that is. Use this framework if it's helpful. It will feel like a very childish version, and that's okay for now. This is workshopping something so that you might be able to use some lines or some sense of what you come up with when you're thinking about how you communicate this to your customers. So let's give you 30 more seconds. I know it's quick. It's a very quick fire exercise, but let's give you 30 more seconds just to write down some thoughts. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of space to think. The exercise we're about to do is genuinely one of the most helpful exercises you will do in a long time, just in terms of really getting some feedback and some advice. But before we do that, I just want to show you one quick hack, because you're all sat there, you're sat down at your desks like you probably are pretty much every day, 24/7, and that will affect your posture. I know we're not really speaking too much about delivery today, but how you sit and how you then therefore breathe and you use your voice is really, really important. If you have a short amount of time, how to get the customer story in, especially if it's like a conversation, and it might feel a bit awkward to try and take the mic for too long and start to go through something in detail. I think then, especially if you have customers, giving stories, so kind of case studies of customers that you've worked with, is quite a nice way to weave it into the conversation. We were also speaking in our breakout room about using your personal story. So weaving that in, often the personal story and the customer story is quite linked. You might have experienced the problem firsthand, which is why then you've built your company to address that problem. So it might be either through the personal story or through a sort of customer testimonial that you weave in that narrative. But it's really worth having the 30-second version of that story down, and then the much longer 2-minute, 5-minute, having different versions so you can play around with them. Some pitches, you're actually not sure they finished because it just doesn't feel like they've got to the end. So make sure it feels like you've actually finished what you're saying. It's like that awkward time in a concert where you're not sure whether to clap because you don't know if the music has ended or if it's still going to carry on. So it needs to feel final. A very typical way to end is like, thank you for listening. Let me know if you've got any questions, which is okay. It's overdone for sure, but it's a very clear signal that you've actually finished. So as long as when you're saying that, you're actually sounding like you're inviting questions rather than it's just one of those throwaway lines you've just put in there, that can be a pretty decent way of finishing. Or what I really enjoy when people do this is where they link the final statement back to the first thing they've said. So if you've had a really compelling hook that you've begun with, a story, a statistic, whatever it might be, then you can circle back round to that at the end and maybe just remind us of that, or have a kind of clever, almost tweetable line which encapsulates what you've been saying, or something which just is great to leave us with. It will be ringing in our ears long after you finish the pitch.
Well, thanks, Ginny. Cheers.
No worries.
We are very tight in time, so if someone has one last question, feel free to throw the hand up, shout it out.
I just have one question, Ginny, and it goes back to earlier on when you started drawing on during your presentation, and one of the presenters in our group had a drawing as well. What are your thoughts on mind mapping as a technique when you're preparing for a presentation or delivering it, in terms of having that kind of simple format in front of you, or have you used that as a technique before?
Yeah, for those of you that are visual learners, having a mind map is a really, really good way of making things, being able to see the information, getting it all down on paper, and maybe even using different colored post-it notes if you're somebody who likes to work with post-its. And so you maybe have blue post-it notes, which are the crucial messages you really need to get across. And then you use yellow post-it notes to have the kind of nice to have things that, if you've got time, would be good to weave in, but are more sub points to back up the main messages. So finding ways of being helpful to yourself when you're getting all your information down, so that you don't feel overwhelmed by everything you want to say, but you're actually splitting out some of that information, even as you're mind mapping, of crucial messages and then nice messages to have, or important messages which aren't necessarily the main thing you want to say.
Thank you.
Great, super stuff. Thank you, everybody. I'm conscious we're very tight on time, but we want to hear from you. So we're going to pop a QR code just on the screen now. What I'm going to ask you to do is there's 7 questions. Give us some feedback and make it constructive, because we want to shape this so it's the most valuable hour and 15 minutes that you can share with other founders on the journey. So any ideas, any potential speakers, where are you stuck? Tell us, and we will pull together something like this, a cracking workshop that everyone walks out and said, okay, I've actually tweaked and improved my pitch after an hour. Like, that has impact. So dates for your diaries. The next Founder Circle is on the 21st of May. So we'll have serial founder David Collier. He's had 3.5 exits. He was one of the early investors in Intercom. Don't we wish we all were? He's going to give an honest, disclosed, closed door session about like big ambitions he has now for his new startup, mastering that like IPO mindset, and share his lessons learned. David is a straight shooter. He's going to call it exactly as it is, so it's not one to be missed. To our facilitators who share today, who every month they come back and help us at the Founder Circle, thank you. To our production team, Fanula in the background, thank you so much. It just wouldn't happen without you. But a big thank you today for Ginny. I really, really enjoyed that session, because I had this chat with Ginny during the week. I learned by doing. And that was just really helpful for me. So thank you. And I know there's other people on the session that are in the same boat. One final thing before we wrap. Sophie Keane has been interning here in RDI Hub for the last couple of months. She has created super content. She has increased her social following by 20%. And she's been a real great addition to the RDI Hub family. And she's leaving us today. But I'll tell you one thing. We're sorry to see her go, but the future is bright, if that's the standard of the interns we have. So best of luck to Sophie in the future. We will see you all here back next month. Have a lovely weekend. Hope the sun shines. See you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.